are you willing to go through?
So we get a speaker. We got to have a speaker, and it can't be some deal with the Democrats. I mean, American people don't want that. They elect Republicans in a majority, small majority. I get it, but we got 200 votes in the first ballot. I think that maybe even is more than what Kevin got back in January, right about where Kevin was. Gus Bilirakis is a vote for us. That's 201. We've had good conversations. We're going to keep working.
Can't be a deal with the Democrats. The American people don't want bipartisanship. No, no, no. Congressman Jim Jordan vowing to continue his pursuit of the speakership despite losing the first vote yesterday after 20 fellow Republicans voted against him. The next vote is scheduled for 11 a.m. this morning. And joining us now, senior writer for The Dispatch, David Drucker, co-host of Showtime's The Circus, NBC News national affairs analyst John Heilman, and special correspondent at Vanity Fair and host of the Fast Politics podcast, Molly Jong-Fast. Her latest piece is entitled "The GOP is Burning Down the House." And actually, let's read from your piece, Molly. We have it here. Yes, let's see. It's Jim Jordan loses his first round as House Speaker. Can we put Molly's piece up? Thanks. In your piece, you write, the Burn It All Down caucus has set itself on fire, a hazard of playing with matches. Now, area arsonist Jim Jordan is revving up the GOP media outrage machine to try and bully his fellow House Republicans to vote for him. But the problem with being a pyromaniac is that fire is exceedingly hard to control. The election-denying Jordan, unsurprisingly, got the endorsement of Trump, who questioned the health of Steve Scalise the same day he beat Jordan for the GOP Speaker nomination. And shortly before he withdrew from the race, Republicans who are put up as potential challengers are immediately attacked by pro-Trump accounts like Elon Musk's favorite @EndWokeness. The thinking here is that Jordan, his allies and supporters can do kind of a French Revolution-style shtick to get him the gavel. Can Jordan steamroll reluctant Republicans into becoming Speaker? Could voting for a right-wing bomb thrower like Jordan scare off potential GOP voters in swing districts and risk the House in 2024? It's hard to see a Jordan speakership not leading to a more Fox-friendly stunts and impeachment hearings, and my guess is Republicans would be better off politically in 2024 by not getting what they want here. But then again, pyromaniacs like to watch the world burn. Molly, I'll just finish off your point by saying, you know, this is a really bad time not to have a speaker, not that there's ever a good time. It's just completely self-destructive behavior, and I'll go where Joe always goes. Republicans seem to love losing in the long run.
Yeah. Well, I also think this Republican Party has been so burn it all down, right? The caucus is the burn it all down caucus. They were trying to prove that government doesn't work. But the problem is you work in government. And so we see Jim Jordan desperately trying to whip these votes. And I think it's important to remember, like, the job of Speaker is both to whip votes, and then it's also to raise money and help win more seats in 24. And Jim Jordan seems uniquely unqualified to do both these things.
So, Heinemann, if, let's say, Jordan were to get it, what would he have to do in order to keep it? What's the payback, right? Because he would get it on sufferance. He'd have to give something. What specifically would he have to give? And how would that affect the, 18 Republicans who have been elected in districts that Joe Biden won?
Well, Katty, I mean, look, for Jim Jordan, the concessions aren't really concessions to the right. I mean, he's sort of already with those people. So the kinds of things that McCarthy had to give up in order to placate the MAGA caucus are things that Jim Jordan wants to give up willingly. He's more in the business of, or in the having the need to try to placate those in the center because they're worried about, having a speaker who comes into the job pledging to shut down the government. It's as Molly suggests, I think she put a bunch of question marks behind things like, could a Jim Jordan speakership lead to Republicans losing control of the House? I think you don't even put a question mark there. You would say more something like a Jim Jordan speakership would obviously jeopardize the seats of every Republican who's in a vulnerable seat, every Republican who is won in a Biden district, the bunch of them up here in New York State that gave control of the House to Republicans in 2022. They're all terrified about the notion of a Jim Jordan speakership. And there are a handful of even people in the Freedom Caucus, the people like Ken Buck, who are very conservative, but look at Jordan as politically toxic and almost certain to guarantee Democrats taking back control of the chamber in 2022. So, the question now is it kind of gives you almost sympathy for, pity for Kevin McCarthy. It kind of makes you realize just how difficult McCarthy's position was. He was the problem with the Republican Party is the Republican Party. It's that the reality is that to stitch together this coalition to hold the gavel with this narrow majority requires somehow an almost impossible straddle. And McCarthy was able to maintain it for a few months. I don't know that Jim Jordan will be able to maintain it for much longer if he somehow gets it. I'm not sure anybody could. There's an internal conflict in the politics of this party that is very, very hard to figure out with this narrow majority.
There was a wire photo making the rounds yesterday that showed a very concerned-looking Jim Jordan sitting in the House chamber with Kevin McCarthy 2 rows behind him, laughing his head off. David Drucker, usually it's a truism that you don't bring votes to the floor if you can't win. Well, Jim Jordan did that yesterday. He lost. 11 a.m. is scheduled to be the next one. Whip count suggests he's not there, and he's not that close. So we'll see if he brings the vote to the floor. We'll see if he does a McCarthy-style multiple votes. But the chatter among Republicans, if he were to do that, he probably starts bleeding support. So give us your sense as to who might step into the breach, but also just your analysis of a Republican Party that continues to fight and eat itself.
Right. So, my sources tell me that Jim Jordan is likely to lose members on the second ballot that he had on the first, even though some who voted against him on the first ballot have announced they will be with him on the second ballot. So I don't know that he's in any better position this morning than he was yesterday. And it's clear that he called off the 6 p.m. vote yesterday, Eastern time, because he didn't have the votes. And you lose a second ballot, and I think this thing is all but dead. But he's been encouraged by Kevin McCarthy to plug ahead, push ahead, and persevere. And the thinking by the former speaker is that Jim Jordan can get there just like he did. I don't think the conference is in a place like that any longer. So I think we're already seeing discussions about empowering Patrick McHenry, the North Carolina congressman who is now the Speaker pro tem, to have all of the powers, at least on the floor of the House of Representatives, that an actual Speaker of the House has, so that the chamber can get back to work and do its job. Right now, I don't think this is a conference that knows where to turn for a speaker because they are so divided. There is so much ill will. And I think a key dynamic here, guys, is that normally it's the pragmatic conservatives in the conference. There really aren't that many moderates. It's really a useless term. It's the pragmatic conservatives who want to govern and understand that in divided government, you have no choice but to cut deals with Democrats that they also get to claim victory for in order to do your job. And normally they would throw up their hands and say, even though it's a minority of our conference that wants to head in this direction, it looks like we have no other choice but to do it, even though we don't want to. And I think after going through what they did with Kevin McCarthy, after seeing members of their own conference ignore their own conference rules and ignore the results of a conference election last week when Steve Scalise was elevated, I think a lot of them had finally had enough and said, we're not going to be patsies anymore. I think this is the viewpoint. And so this goes now deeper than Jim Jordan wouldn't be good for, defending and growing our majority, or Jim Jordan may want to shut the government down and I have policy disagreements with him. I think this has become a case of I'm tired of being pushed around. I'm tired of a minority of our conference ignoring our own rules. And so now I'm going to play the same game of hardball that they are.
So what could be the outcome of that, John Hammond? What are you watching for? Because, it really looking like a crazy minority, a small group of people have total control over the party. Sounds very Trumpy. And at the same time, there could be political ramifications, which we've discussed. And can we just talk about who Jim Jordan is? What he stands for. He's an election denier. Everything pertaining to January 6th. Does it truly benefit the Republicans to elect him as Speaker? Or is there another way forward? Isn't Congress about making deals? Isn't that what they do?
Oh, Mika, what a quaint notion. Compromise, governance. I don't know what generation last adhered to those views. I can't really recall. Look, You know, as David just said, I think, you know, there are now these kind of primal forces in play. It's not even about rational calculation anymore from what you can see. You know, we can talk about Jim Jordan, but I think he is increasingly looking like yesterday's news. If he brings this vote to the floor at all, which he seems determined to, but if he does bring the vote to the floor and it does go down, I don't think that he has the McCarthy. First of all, I don't think he actually has the McCarthy's relentless, unquenchable desire to be speaker, and is probably unwilling to make any deal to get himself the speakership. But you know, we could be done with Jim Jordan as a prospective speaker within a few hours here today, and then there is this McHenry possibility. And Molly, here's one of the things that I wonder about. You raised this in your column. Is you know, one of the things that among the many cross currents and pressures that are on these Republicans right now is obviously the situation in Israel, where the inability to have a functional House of Representatives means that, and we heard Joe Biden this morning, there's some discussion of reporting that suggests Biden's going to come forward with a $100 billion aid package for Israel and Ukraine. There is going to be, among other forces here, there is the Republican donor class, which desperately wants to be able to be on board at least for Israel aid and in many cases for Ukraine aid. As long as the House is paralyzed like this, that can't happen. And I can't help but think that part of what's going on here is not about either politics or about governance, but is merely about being able to make sure the Republican donor base doesn't finally just throw up its hands and say, we're done with you people if you can't get it together and help Israel in particular.
Yeah, I think the Republican donor base is a huge concern. And I also think it's worth remembering that Jim Jordan is not the right person to make a case that the Republican Party has gone so far right it is no longer electable in swing districts, right? You're going to have that guy shopping a sort of roadshow that we are electable. It seems very unlikely. So I do think that's right. I also think it's really worth thinking about how alienated the Republican donor base is. The money they're giving to Trump, they're worried is going to his legal bills. You know, I think Nikki Haley has become this last-minute Hail Mary, but I think they're pretty alienated at this point.